Welcome to Folklore Shadows, where we explore the most haunting and mysterious stories ever told. In this video, we'll take you on two chilling journeys. First, we descend into the depths of the whispers of the well, where a man uncovers dark secrets buried in the shadows of his own land. Then, we delve into the portrait of silence, following a tormented artist as her haunting paintings reveal truths she's desperate to forget. Each story is crafted to chill your spine and ignite your imagination. So, sit back, dim the lights, and let the shadows tell their tale. The Whispers of the Well. It began with the rain. Heavy, relentless, drumming against the earth for days without pause. Jackson had moved to the countryside for peace, but instead, he found isolation, a house creaking under the weight of the storm in a land soaked in melancholy. The first time he heard the whispers, he thought it was the wind. A faint murmur carried by the rain, something almost imperceptible. But it came again that night, clearer, deliberate, a voice. "Help me," it was faint, broken, and desperate, coming from somewhere behind the house. Jackson lit his lantern, wrapping himself in a raincoat, and stepped into the downpour. His boots sank into the mud as he followed the sound toward the back of his property. There, in the overgrowth, stood an ancient well, forgotten and half covered by moss. Its stones were slick and black, and the air around it felt colder than the storm. "Help me," the voice came again, faint but undeniably real. Jackson leaned closer, peering into the darkness of the well, but saw only shadows. "Who's there?" he called, his voice trembling. The silence stretched, broken only by the rain. But then, a whisper rose again, almost brushing against his ear. "You'll understand, soon." Jackson staggered back, his lantern flickering as unease curled in his stomach. He decided it was the storm playing tricks on his mind. He retreated to his house, locking the door behind him. But the whispers didn't stop. They came again the next night, and the next. Each time, they grew louder, clearer, more insistent. By the third night, Jackson couldn't sleep. The whispers were no longer confined to the well, they seemed to seep into the walls, filling his home with their relentless murmurs. "You must see," the voices urged. "You must know." Compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, Jackson returned to the well. This time, he brought a rope and a flashlight. He wasn't sure what he intended to do, but the whispers left him no choice. As he secured the rope to a nearby tree, the air grew heavy, almost electric, and the whispers turned to a low hum, like a chant. Slowly, he descended into the darkness. The stones of the well were damp and slick beneath his fingers, and the smell of wet earth filled his nostrils. At first, the flashlight revealed nothing but slimy walls and dripping water. But as Jackson lowered himself further, he noticed carvings on the stones, ancient symbols he couldn't understand. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. They no longer sounded like a single voice, but a chorus, layered and echoing. "Deeper," they urged. "It's waiting." At the bottom of the well, Jackson's feet touched solid ground. His flashlight flickered, the beam weak against the oppressive darkness. There, in the center of the well, was something impossible, a doorway, carved into the stone, glowing faintly. The whispers surged, filling his head with urgency. "Open it," they cried. "See the truth." Against his better judgment, Jackson reached out and pushed the door. It creaked open, revealing a tunnel that stretched beyond the confines of the well. The walls of the tunnel pulsed faintly, like something alive. The air was heavy, suffused with a metallic tang. As Jackson stepped inside, the whispers transformed into a cacophony of voices, each overlapping, telling fragmented stories of despair, betrayal, and hunger. At the end of the tunnel, he found it, a massive chamber filled with mirrors. The mirrors weren't ordinary. Each one reflected Jackson, but not as he was. They showed him older, younger, distorted, wounded, dying. The whispers now came from his own reflections, each version of himself speaking in unison. "This is your truth." Jackson staggered back, his mind unraveling as he tried to process the impossible. One reflection stepped forward, moving independently of him, a version of himself, smiling cruelly. "You belong here now," the reflection said. The chamber began to close in on him, the walls pulsing, the mirrors distorting into grotesque shapes. Jackson ran, the tunnel twisting and narrowing behind him. The whispers turned to screams, and the air grew thick, like tar, pulling at his legs. He reached the bottom of the well, scrambling up the rope as the voices howled in fury. The moment he emerged, the air was still, the storm gone. The well stood silent, its stones cold and lifeless. Jackson collapsed beside it, gasping for air. But when he looked back, the doorway was gone, the whispers silenced. Days passed, but Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him. At night, he would see glimpses of himself in the windows, moving when he wasn't. The whispers returned, faint at first, then louder. "You can't run," they said. One morning, Jackson woke to find his reflection missing from the mirror. Instead, the cruel version of himself stared back, smiling. And then, the whispers stopped. The portrait of silence. It began with an empty canvas. Celeste, a renowned portrait artist, had spent years building her reputation as a genius, capturing the essence of her subjects in every stroke. But recently, something had changed. Her latest works came from somewhere unfamiliar, almost as if her hands moved on their own. She couldn't recall selecting the colors or outlining the faces. Yet the portraits were extraordinary, hauntingly real. The first painting was of a young man with hollow eyes, his expression frozen in terror. Celeste stared at it for hours, unsure why she felt such dread. The gallery where it was displayed called it her masterpiece. But when she returned home, she found the same young man's face on a missing person poster stapled to a lamppost near her studio. Celeste dismissed it as a coincidence. She had no memory of painting the man, but the human mind could play tricks. Couldn't it? A week later, another face emerged on her canvas, a woman this time. Her eyes brimmed with unshed tears, and her lips parted as if she were trying to scream. Celeste's hand trembled as she added the final details. When the painting was complete, she felt a wave of nausea. The woman's face lingered in her mind, and she couldn't sleep that night. The following morning, Celeste turned on the news. The woman she had painted was being reported missing. Her name was Emily Daniels, and she had vanished 2 days earlier. Celeste's stomach churned. How was it possible? She had never seen this woman before, had she? Over the next few weeks, the paintings became more vivid, more disturbing. Each face seemed to plead with her through the canvas, begging for salvation. The colors she used grew darker, deep reds and shadowy blacks dominated her palette. The most unsettling detail was the blood. In every painting, there was a faint smear of red on the subject's skin, like a warning she couldn't decode. Celeste's world began to shift. Her studio felt suffocating, her brushes heavy, her canvas alive. It wasn't long before she noticed the whispers. Faint at first, but growing louder with each painting. "You know them," the voices hissed. "You've seen them before." She searched her mind for answers, but found only blanks. Where were these faces coming from? Why did they feel so familiar? Her home began to decay around her. Walls she had painted bright and cheerful seemed to lose their color. Her reflection in the mirror grew faint, like she was fading from reality. Celeste retreated into her studio, desperate for clarity. She began another painting, her hands moving as if controlled by someone or something else. The face that emerged this time sent a shiver down her spine. It was her. Her own face stared back, distorted and pained, with streaks of crimson running down her cheeks. Her lips were sewn shut, and her eyes seemed to scream a truth her mind refused to comprehend. Celeste threw the canvas aside, but the whispers grew deafening. "Finish it," they urged. "You must finish it." Reluctantly, she picked up her brush. As she painted, memories began flooding back, moments she had buried deep within herself. A car ride at night. The sound of tires screeching. A collision. And then, faces. The faces of passengers she hadn't remembered until now. The faces of those she couldn't save. Her hand trembled as she completed the painting. The whispers stopped. Silence enveloped her studio. She stared at the final portrait, tears streaming down her face. The faces of every missing person she had painted were there, crowded behind her own. Their expressions mirrored her guilt, her sorrow. As the truth settled over her, the world around Celeste began to dissolve. Her studio crumbled into blackness, her paintings fading one by one. She tried to scream, but her voice was gone. Her reflection in the mirror returned, smiling cruelly, before fading completely. In the end, there was only silence and the faint echo of her brush against the canvas, painting portraits for an audience that no longer existed. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the eerie and unknown. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to Folklore Shadows for more haunting tales. Let us know in the comments which story chilled you the most. Until next time, may the shadows always be just out of reach.